In the heart of Igbo land, where tradition weaved the fabric of life, lies Oka, a village of pride, honor, and secrets buried deep. Here, the past whispers through the palm trees, and love, though beautiful, can be a dangerous flame. This is the story of Grace, a maiden whose heart carried a forbidden dream, and Daniel, a prince whose love would challenge the gods themselves. Grace was no ordinary maiden. Her beauty was like the morning dew, pure, fleeting, and impossible to ignore. Her laughter could hush the loudest market, and her kindness mended hearts before they knew they were broken. But Grace carried a weight no one could see. She was an outcast, a descendant of those dedicated to the deities long ago. In Oka, to be an outcast was to be untouchable, a shadow cast outside the circle of the freeborn. Her family lived on the edge of the village, in a quiet compound where whispers of their status clung like damp earth. Grace's parents, Rose and David, loved her fiercely, but their eyes always held a silent apology. They knew the world beyond their fence saw her not as their daughter, but as a mark of the gods. Rose would tell Grace stories of her grandmother, an outcast woman who danced at the shrine, her feet never touching freeborn soil. David, a man of few words, taught Grace to hold her head high, even when the village turned away. But Grace dreamed of more, a life where her heart could soar without chains. Across the village, in the palace of Oka's king, lived Prince Daniel, the only son of King Edward and Queen Naomi. Daniel was the pride of his people, brave, kind, and destined to lead. His friends, Caleb and Nathan, filled his days with laughter and tales of conquest. But Daniel's heart sought something deeper. He longed for a love that would echo through the ages, not just a union to strengthen the throne. His mother, Queen Naomi, watched him closely. Her dreams for his future tied tradition. His father, King Edward, saw it in the future of Oakwood, a king who would uphold their ways. It was at the harvest festival that fate wove its first thread. The air was thick with the scent of roasted yam and palm wine, and the village pulsed with life. Grace rarely attended such gatherings. Her place was on the fringes, where outcasts were tolerated but never welcomed. Yet tonight, her friend Anna had begged her come, promising no one would notice. Grace stood apart, her heart racing, feeling the weight of unseen eyes. And then she saw him, Daniel, his presence like a storm held still. Their eyes met across the fire, and for a moment, the world fell silent. Daniel felt a pull he couldn't explain, as if the gods themselves had tied a cord between them. Grace's beauty was not just in her face, but in the way she carried her solitude, like a queen who didn't yet know her crown. He didn't know her name, didn't know her story, but he knew he needed to. For Grace, that moment was a spark of hope and terror. She'd heard of the prince, seen him from afar, but to meet his gaze was to step into a forbidden world. She turned to leave, her heart pounding, but Daniel was already moving toward her. In that fleeting glance, two worlds collided, one bound by duty, the other by stigma. Neither knew the storm that waited, nor the choices that would tear their hearts apart. But in Oka, where tradition ruled like an iron hand, love was never simple. And for Grace and Daniel, it was only the beginning. In Oka, the gods were never far. Their presence lingered in the shrines, in the colonnade broken at dawn, in the laws that bound the village like an unbroken chain. The outcast system, ancient as the hills, was one such law, a mark of devotion to the deities, but a curse to those who bore it. To be outcast was to live apart, forbidden from marrying the freeborn, their dreams tethered to the will of the gods. For Grace, this truth was a shadow that followed her every step. Yet in her heart, a spark had ignited. One named Daniel, a prince whose gaze promised a world she could never touch. Grace found solace in Anna, her friend since childhood, a freeborn girl who saw her not as outcast but as a sister. Anna's defiance of whispers had carved a fragile space for Grace in Oka's heart, but even she could not erase the invisible line. Today, the market buzzed with talk of the festival, and of Prince Daniel, whose eyes had lingered on a mysterious maiden. Anna teased Grace, her voice light but her eyes sharp with worry. Grace, don't tell me you didn't see the prince staring. The whole village is talking, but you're quiet like a snail in its shell. What happened? Grace's smile was small, her heart a storm of hope and fear. She wanted to confess the warmth that had bloomed when Daniel's eyes met hers, but the word outcast choked her words. Anna, sensing her hesitation, squeezed her hand, promising to keep her secrets. But secrets in Oka were like water in a cracked pot. They never stayed contained. Across the village, Daniel was a man haunted. The maiden from the festival consumed his thoughts. Her grace, her quiet strength, the mystery in her eyes. Caleb and Nathan had noticed his silence, his distraction from their usual banter. Caleb, ever the jester, mocked him for chasing a shadow, but Nathan's gaze held a warning. In Oka, a prince's heart was not his own. It belonged to the throne, to tradition, to the gods. Daniel spoke her name, Grace, learned from a market woman's careless chatter. Caleb laughed, slapping his thigh, urging Daniel to pursue her as a fleeting fancy. But Nathan's face darkened. He knew the whispers, the truth Daniel had yet to grasp. Grace was an outcast. To love her was to defy the sacred order, to invite the wrath of the gods and the scorn of Oka. Yet Daniel's heart, stubborn as the oak tree, refused to bend. Oka thrived on its traditions, each ritual a thread in the tapestry of Igbo life. The kala nut was broken to honor ancestors. The masquerades danced to bridge the living and the dead, and the outcast system stood as a reminder of vows made to the gods. To break these laws was to unravel the village itself. Daniel, raised on these truths, felt them clash with the fire in his chest. Grace, bound by them, felt their weight like stones on her soul. At home, Grace's silence spoke louder than words. Rose noticed a change in her daughter, the way her fingers trembled, the way her eyes drifted to the stars. She feared the rumors circling like hawks. The prince had asked about Grace. Rose's heart ached. She loved Grace's spirit, but knew the pain of dreaming beyond the outcast line. David, ever protective, said nothing, but his grip on the machete tightened. They had seen what happened to outcasts who dare to love freeborn. Shame, exile, or worse. In the palace, whispers reached Queen Naomi's ears. Her son, her pride, was chasing a dream that could stain the throne. She spoke to King Edward, her voice a mix of fear and fury, urging him to guide Daniel back to duty. King Edward, a man of tradition, believed in his son's heart but feared the gods' judgment. The outcasts were sacred yet untouchable, a paradox that guarded Oka's peace. To let Daniel pursue Grace was to risk their legacy, their name, their gods. Daniel could no longer resist. He sought Grace, driven by a force stronger than fear. He found her by the stream, her silhouette a painting against the moonlit water. Grace froze at his approach, her heart a drumbeat of joy and dread. They spoke. Tentative words at first, then a flood of dreams, fears, and truths. Daniel saw her not as outcast, but as Grace, the woman who stirred his soul. Grace saw in him a world she would never dared imagine. But the night was not theirs alone. The village watched. In Oka, love was a sacred fire, beautiful when kindled within the bounds of tradition, but dangerous when it strayed. For Daniel and Grace, that fire burned brighter with each stolen moment, a flame that warmed their hearts but threatened to consume their world. Their love grew in whispers by the stream, in glances across the market, in dreams that defied the gods. But in a village where every eye watched and every tongue spoke, their secret was a fragile thing, and the weight of their family's fears was heavier than stone. By the stream, Daniel and Grace built a world of their own. He told her of his boyhood, of racing through the forest with Caleb and Nathan, dreaming of battles and glory. She spoke of weaving baskets with her mother, Rose, and listening to her father, David, carve tales into wood. Each word drew them closer, their laughter a melody that drowned out the village's whispers. Daniel saw in Grace a spirit unbroken by stigma, a heart that matched his own. Grace felt in Daniel a courage that made her believe, if only for a moment, that love could rewrite her fate. When he reached for her hand, she didn't pull away, and in that touch, their bond became a vow. Grace's happiness was a beacon her parents could not ignore. Rose, whose heart had weathered years of outcast scorn, saw the danger in her daughter's glow. She remembered her own youth, when a freeborn boy had smiled at her, only for his family to curse her name and drive her away. Rose sat Grace down, her voice trembling as she spoke of the outcast curse. To love a freeborn was to invite shame, exile, or the god's wrath. David, silent until now, added his warning, his voice low but fierce, promising to protect Grace, even from her own heart. Grace listened, her eyes glistening, but Daniel's name burned too brightly to be extinguished. In the palace, Daniel's parents felt a storm gathering. Queen Naomi, a woman forged in tradition, had heard the rumors. Her son, the prince, was seen by the stream with an outcast girl, her heart twisted with love for Daniel and fear for his future. She dreamed of him marrying a freeborn maiden, one whose lineage would strengthen Oka's throne. To her, Grace was not a name but a threat, a stain that could tarnish their legacy. King Edward, though calmer, shared her dread. As king, he had sworn to uphold the laws of the gods, including the divide between outcast and freeborn. He loved Daniel's spirit, but fear's defiance would fracture the village's fragile peace. Despite the warnings, Daniel and Grace's love grew like a river after rain, wild, unstoppable, carving its own path. Daniel spoke of a life beyond Oka's laws, where they could build a home free from judgment. Grace, though fearful, let herself dream, imagining waking beside Daniel, no longer hiding in the shadows, no longer bowing to the label of outcast, but dreams in Oka often walked hand in hand with danger. It was Nathan who first brought the matter before the elders, not out of malice, but fear. He'd watched Daniel grow from a curious boy into a man of conviction. But this was madness. Loving Grace wasn't just rebellion. It was sacrilege. Nathan's warning echoed in the council hall like thunder. The prince walks toward ruin, he said, led by a heart blinded to truth. The elders, men with faces lined by time and loyalty to the gods, stirred. The outcast law was not to be bent. It had been sealed generations ago in blood and vow. Allowing Grace near the throne would not only break tradition, it would anger the very spirits who protected Oka. When the king summoned Daniel to the palace court, silence greeted him like a tomb. His father's face was stern. His mother's eyes brimmed with disappointment and fear. "Do you love her?" King Edward asked, his voice low, heavy. "I do," Daniel replied, standing tall. "She is an outcast. She is a woman, braver than many, kind beyond measure. She is Grace." Queen Naomi stepped forward, her voice trembling. "And what of your people? Your legacy? Will you throw it away for a love that cannot be blessed by the gods?" "I would rather lead in truth than rule in fear," Daniel replied. The council's decision was swift. Grace was to be banished from Oka, her family sent farther to the forest's edge, beyond where even the masquerades walked. It was a mercy, they claimed. A true punishment would call for cleansing rituals, stripping, shame, maybe even death. That night, Grace sat in her compound, her world unraveling. Rose held her daughter close, weeping silently. David sharpened his cutlass outside, not for use, but to steady his trembling hands. The village had decided love in its purest form was not enough to outweigh tradition. Daniel came, of course, through the back road, his cloak hiding him from watching eyes. He found Grace under the almond tree, where they first spoke without fear. Her face lit up when she saw him, but then fell, remembering what had been decided. "I will leave with you," she whispered. "No," Daniel said. "I will fight. I will not leave this village to the hands of fear. I will speak to the people, not as a prince, but as a man who believes love can heal what tradition has broken." Grace's tears fell freely. "They will not hear you. Then I'll make them listen." The next day, Daniel stood before the elders and the people of Oka. He did not wear royal robes. He stood in the plain tunic of a commoner. "I was taught to lead with strength," he said. "But strength without compassion is tyranny. Our laws protect us, but they also bind us. We speak of honoring the gods, but have we forgotten that the gods are love, too? Grace has never harmed this land, yet we punish her for the blood she didn't choose. We say she is unworthy, yet her heart beats louder with honor than many born free. If this is tradition, then tradition must change." Silence, then murmurs, then shouts. Some agreed, some curse him. The elders demanded he step down as heir. The people were split. That night, something strange happened. A storm unlike any in Oka's memory tore through the village. The shrine was struck by lightning. The idol of the river goddess cracked down the middle. The high priest, Elder Tobias, fell into a trance and awoke with trembling hands. "I saw the gods," he whispered. They were silent, but their silence was not anger. It was sorrow. By morning, the elders called a second meeting. For the first time in Oka's history, they voted on whether to abolish the Outcast law. The vote was tied until Elder Tobias cast a final vote. "Yes," he said, his voice breaking. "It is time." The village stood in shock. And so Oka changed. Grace was no longer an outcast. She stood beside Daniel, not in secret, but before the people. Their wedding was simple, held under the almond tree, attended by villagers still trying to understand the new world they lived in. But when Daniel looked into Grace's eyes, he saw not just a woman he loved, but a symbol of change, of courage, and of love that defied the odds. And as for the gods, they remained silent, not in judgment, but in peace. Years passed in Oka. The village, once divided by invisible walls of tradition and fear, slowly healed. Some elders retired quietly. Others became silent observers of the change they once resisted. Grace and Daniel ruled not as king and queen, but as partners, leading with wisdom and compassion. They opened the village to forgotten families, giving the outcast lands a voice and a name. Children were born who didn't understand what it meant to be cursed by blood. They only knew stories, old tales of love so bold it changed the village forever. And under the same almond tree where everything began, Grace would often sit, her hands brushing through the grass, watching the sunset, whispering to the wind. Love was never sin. Fear was. Don't forget to hit that subscription button to like, share with loved ones, and subscribe to our channel for more powerful, deep folktales that carries ancient histories. See you in the next video. God bless you.